10 seconds. That is literally all it took. 10 careless, unguarded, catastrophically expensive seconds to flip a major American broadcasting network completely upside down, send social media into an absolute frenzy, and turn one quietly focused 20-year-old tennis player from the Philippines into the most talked about athlete on the entire internet. An ABC anchor wrapped up a segment, leaned back in her chair, and assumed the microphone was off. It was not. One cold, dismissive little line about Alex Eala escaped that studio, hit social media at the speed of lightning, and by sunrise the next morning, it had already burned through every platform, every sports forum, every Filipino community group on the planet. The suspension came fast, the regret came even faster. And now the entire sports world is sitting with one very uncomfortable question. Was this just a thoughtless slip of the tongue? Or did those 10 seconds pull back the curtain on something far more troubling, hiding inside the way American sports media talks about athletes who rise from places they were never supposed to come from? Before we go any deeper into this story, let me speak directly to every single person watching right now. If Alex Eala's journey, her grind, her sacrifice, her quiet and relentless rise, makes you feel something real, then tap that like button right now and drop "proud to be Filipino" in the comments below. This channel exists for moments exactly like this one. And if you genuinely believe in your heart that Alex Eala is on her way to cracking the WTA top 5 in the not-so-distant future, hit that like button and comment top 5 because we are planting that flag early right here on this channel. And if there is not a single doubt in your mind that Alex Eala is the undisputed pride of an entire nation, hit like and drop a heart in the comments so that she and the whole world can see where this community stands. Now let us get into every detail of this story, because it deserves to be told fully, loudly, and without pulling a single punch. This was not about a missed forehand. It was not about a double fault or a tough draw or a bad day in a quarterfinal. It was about a hot microphone that caught something that was never supposed to leave the walls of that studio. The anchor had just wrapped up a segment analyzing Alex Eala's recent performance on tour. The segment ended. The floor director moved on. Producers were shuffling toward the next block. The studio lights were still blazing. And in what the anchor clearly believed was a private exchange between colleagues, she leaned over, smiled, and said it. Plainly, casually, with the confidence of someone who had probably thought it 100 times before. She's not that good. The hype is just because she's from the Philippines. That was the whole thing. No lengthy argument, no elaborate breakdown, just one cold, dismissive sentence delivered in a relaxed tone that suggested this was not a slip under pressure. It was a belief, already settled, already comfortable, already ready to be shared the moment no important eyes were watching. But here is the thing that the anchor forgot in that moment. In 2026, there is always a phone. There is always someone recording. There is always a clip. Someone inside that studio captured it, and the moment that clip touched the internet, it did not walk. It did not stroll. It sprinted across every platform with the kind of velocity that only happens when something cuts deep enough to make millions of people stop scrolling and start sharing. Within hours, X was flooded. TikTok was buried under reaction videos, Reddit threads lit up with debate, YouTube channels covering tennis, sports commentary, Filipino culture, and media accountability all started reposting the clip and adding their own commentary. Sports podcasts were playing the line on repeat. And suddenly, Alex Eala was not trending because of her blistering forehand, her footwork, her mental toughness in a third-set tiebreak, or the jaw-dropping list of ranked opponents she had already defeated. She was trending because a broadcaster at one of the most recognizable networks in American television had tried in 10 seconds to reduce one of the most remarkable young careers in women's tennis to a question of geography. Now let us stop and actually talk about who Alex Eala is, because if you are going to casually dismiss someone on a hot mic, the very least you owe the world is an awareness of their resume. Alexandra Maniego Eala was born on May 23, 2005 in Quezon City, Philippines. Her father, Mike, is a businessman. Her mother, Riza Maniego Eala, is a former national swimmer who competed at the 1985 Southeast Asian Games and brought home a bronze medal in the 100-meter backstroke. Athletic DNA runs through this family in a real way, but nothing about Alex's tennis journey came with shortcuts. At just 13 years old, she left her home, her comfort, her country, and traveled to Mallorca, Spain, to train at the Rafael Nadal Academy, one of the most elite and demanding tennis development programs on the planet. Let that land for a second. 13 years old. While kids her age were figuring out middle school, Eala was grinding on clay courts under the Spanish sun, betting everything on a dream that most reasonable people around her probably thought was a little too large for one girl from Quezon City to chase. And then, one by one, the trophies started validating the bet. In 2020, at just 14, she and Indonesia's Priska Nugroho won the Australian Open junior doubles title. She came back the very next year and claimed the Roland Garros junior doubles crown. And then in 2022, she etched her name into a place in tennis history that no Filipino had ever reached before, winning the US Open junior singles title and becoming the very first Filipino in history to claim a Grand Slam junior singles championship. These are not consolation prizes. These are not participation trophies handed out at regional junior tournaments. These are titles that sit on the same pages of tennis history as the names people put on stadium banners and sports documentaries. But she was not finished. She had barely started. The leap from junior champion to professional tour success is one of the most brutal transitions in all of sport. The opponents are fitter, smarter, more experienced, and more ruthless. The margin for error effectively disappears overnight. The travel becomes relentless. The losses hit harder because now they carry ranking consequences, and the psychological weight of expectation grows heavier with every match. But Eala did not blink. She collected ITF titles. She pushed her ranking steadily upward. She showed up on tour after tour, match after match, learning and improving and refusing to let the difficulty of the journey become a reason to stop walking it. And then came 2025. Let us spend real time here, because 2025 is where the anchor's hot mic comment does not just become offensive, it becomes statistically, historically, demonstrably ridiculous. Eala began 2025 ranked number 147 in the world. She received a wildcard invitation to the Miami Open, a WTA 1000 event that draws the very best women's tennis players alive. Walking in as a wildcard at a WTA 1000 is roughly the equivalent of showing up to a championship boxing match without ever having been on the main card before, and she won. Not once, not twice. She defeated Madison Keys, who was ranked number 5 in the world. She then turned around and defeated Iga Swiatek, ranked number 2 on the planet and one of the most dominant players in the modern era of the women's game. She became the first Filipino in history to reach a WTA 1000 semifinal and the first Filipino ever to enter the WTA World Top 100. Her ranking did not crawl. It leaped from 147 all the way to 75 in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, that is not a feel-good storyline. That is a seismic shift. And she kept going. She reached her first ever WTA Tour level final at the Eastbourne International. She won her first WTA 125 title in Guadalajara. She made her Grand Slam main draw debut at Roland Garros. She became the first Filipino in history to win a Grand Slam singles match in the Open era, defeating Clara Towson at the US Open in the first round, and she ended the 2025 season ranked number 50 in the world, a 97th-place climb in a single calendar year, a career high, a national record, a piece of history that no Filipino tennis player had ever come close to before. Then the 2026 season opened, and she kept raising the bar. She reached the semifinals of the Auckland Open. She debuted at the Australian Open main draw. She reached the quarterfinals of the inaugural Philippine Women's Open, competing in front of her own people on home soil for the first time as a professional, which was its own kind of historic moment. She traveled to Abu Dhabi and reached the quarterfinals of a WTA 500 event, including a stunning 3-set comeback win over Alexandra Sasnovich after trailing 4-0 in the deciding set. By February 9, 2026, she reached her new career-high ranking of number 40 in the world, making her the highest-ranked Filipino tennis player in the entire history of the WTA Tour. And then, just days after that, she stepped onto the court at the Dubai Tennis Championships and defeated Jasmine Paolini, ranked number 8 in the world at the time, in straight sets, securing her third career win against a top 10 opponent and pushing her live ranking to number 38 and climbing. As of right now, she is playing at one of the most competitive events on the calendar and showing absolutely no signs of slowing down. So when the anchor said the hype around Alex Eala is just because she is from the Philippines, let us ask a simple, direct, completely fair question. Which part of that resume was gifted by nationality? Which WTA 1000 semifinal was awarded because a committee somewhere decided a Filipino player deserved a feel-good moment? Which win over the number 2 ranked player in the world was handed over out of sympathy? Which ranking points arrived courtesy of national sentiment? None. Not a single one. Because in tennis, nationality does not earn points. Skill earns points. Hard work earns points. Years of grinding on courts far from home, losing matches that hurt, coming back the next morning and doing it again, and then again, and then again, that earns points. Alex Eala did not rise to number 38 in the world because she is Filipino. She rose there because she is extraordinary. When the clip hit social media, the reaction was immediate and it was enormous. Hashtags began trending within hours. In the Philippines, the clip spread at the speed that only happens when something cuts people somewhere genuinely deep. Filipino communities overseas shared it instantly. Students studying in London, families in Los Angeles, coaches in Manila, young players in Cebu who had just started picking up rackets. Because here is the context that the anchor clearly never paused to consider. Tennis is not the Philippines' dominant sport. Basketball owns the soul of the nation. Boxing has produced world champions who became national legends. Football is growing. But tennis? Tennis is climbing, specifically and directly because of what Alex Eala has been doing. She opened a door for an entire generation. When she walks onto a Grand Slam court, she brings with her every Filipino kid who ever held a racket and let themselves wonder whether someone who looks like them, who comes from where they come from, could make it at the very highest level of the sport. That is what was sitting inside those 10 careless seconds. Not just a player, an entire generation of possibility. By the following morning, ABC had a very serious problem. Executives made their move the way executives do when they know their sponsors are already dialing in. A carefully worded statement was released through official channels. The comment made off air does not represent the values of our organization. The anchor has been suspended pending investigation. Suspended, just like that. A career built over years, placed on hold because of 10 words spoken into a microphone that was supposed to be quiet. Sponsors reportedly began asking uncomfortable questions. Advertisers started appearing in the same social media posts that were already tagging the network in waves of anger. Media critics who cover sports broadcasting began writing pieces about unconscious bias in sports coverage, about the subtle and not so subtle patterns in how athletes from outside the traditional tennis powerhouses are discussed, analyzed, and, apparently, privately dismissed when the segment is over and the camera supposedly stops mattering. And here is where this story reveals something genuinely extraordinary. While the internet was screaming, while the debate raged across every platform, while PR teams worked around the clock and legal departments pulled out contracts and corporate spokespeople carefully drafted statements, Alex Eala was completely, totally, beautifully silent. No angry tweet, no dramatic Instagram post cataloging every microaggression she had ever navigated. No lengthy statement demanding apologies. Her most recent public update was a simple training photo, a focused expression, sweat on her collar, a racket in her hand, just the court, the work, and her. That silence was not weakness. That silence was not passivity. That silence was one of the most powerful statements an athlete can make. It said, without a single word, that while everyone else is arguing about her worth, she is in the gym making herself better. While the clip was going viral, she was drilling footwork. While networks were scrambling for damage control, she was working on her serve. Fans saw it, and what they saw turned that silence into its own kind of armor. Because the louder the noise became outside, the more powerful her calm looked by comparison. Now let us address the people who stepped forward to defend the anchor, because there were some, and fairness demands that we acknowledge them. It was taken out of context, several people argued. It was a private exchange between colleagues. It was never intended for air. And maybe every single one of those things is technically true. But here is the problem with that defense, and it is not a small problem. Private comments do not reveal a character that does not exist in public. They reveal the character that exists when someone believes there are no consequences for what they say. The defense that something was private actually makes the revelation more significant, not less. Because what it tells you is that this was not a panicked mistake made under the pressure of a live broadcast. This was a casual, comfortable, relaxed expression of a belief that was already settled, already shared without hesitation, and already at home in the speaker's mind. And that, quite specifically, is what people reacted to with such force. By day 3, the story had momentum that no PR strategy could cut off. Other networks reported on it. Sports talk shows spent entire segments debating media bias in the coverage of athletes from the global south. Late-night hosts cracked nervous jokes about hot mic disasters. Nervous, because everyone in the television business knows that the line between a career-defining mistake and a forgettable slip is nothing more than the question of who clips what and when. ABC's polished corporate statement felt genuinely small next to the emotional scale of the public reaction. Because the public was not asking for a statement. The public was asking a deeper question. They were asking whether this single comment reflected something systemic, a pattern of subtle dismissal in the way athletes from smaller nations get discussed, not just on hot mics, but in the undertones of live coverage, in the faint surprise in a commentator's voice when an underdog wins, in the framing that treats certain breakthroughs as anomalies rather than evidence of genuine, sustained, world-class excellence. Meanwhile, Alex kept training. New footage surfaced online. Footwork drills, the clean sound of racket meeting ball, the squeak of court shoes on a hard surface. No caption, no message attached, no need for one. The footage was the message. You talk, I will play. And the tennis will answer louder than any trending hashtag ever could. That quiet, focused, utterly consistent response impressed people more deeply than any strongly worded social media post could have. Because sometimes the most powerful response is not loud, it is relentless. It is showing up on the court every single day and getting better and letting the scoreboard do the talking. Let us pull back now and look at the larger picture, because Alex Eala's story does not exist in isolation. It sits inside a much broader and older conversation about how the sports world treats athletes who rise from countries that the traditional establishment was not expecting to hear from. Athletes from smaller nations navigate a specific kind of doubt that their counterparts from the historically dominant tennis countries do not. They are called surprising. They are described as unexpected. Their success is framed as a pleasant detour from the natural order of things, rather than as evidence of real, deep, world-class talent. They are treated like temporary storylines, feel-good moments that will eventually give way to the players the narrative was always supposed to be about. And when those athletes keep winning anyway, when they refuse to be temporary, the established narrative has to shift, and the discomfort of that shift sometimes finds a way out when the camera appears to stop rolling. But here's what the history of sport tells us, over and over and over again, in every era and every discipline. Doubt does not stop greatness. It feeds it. Athletes remember the rooms they walked into where everyone in the room expected them to fail. They remember the subtle dismissals, the polite disbelief, the comments on hot mics. They file every single piece of that away, and they use it. The fuel that powers the greatest athletic careers is very often made from exactly the kind of casual disrespect that spills out when someone thinks the audience has stopped paying attention.